you're taking the house, my father said. He didn't look up from the legal pad in front of him. We're not asking. That was how the dinner started. No hello. No how have you been? My mother had made pot roast, and the smell of it filled the kitchen the same way it always had when I was growing up, warm and heavy and false, like everything else in that house. I sat down across from them at the table where I had learned to read, where I had done 1,000 homework assignments, where I had eaten 10,000 quiet meals while my brother kicked me under the table and my parents pretended not to see. My sister-in-law was there too, sitting at the end with her hands folded in her lap like she was at a job interview. She didn't make eye contact, she already knew what was coming. The house, I repeated. My father finally looked up. He had the same eyes I remembered from childhood. Not cruel exactly, but very certain. He had always been certain about everything, and that certainty had eaten our family alive from the inside without him ever noticing. Your brother's practice is underwater, he said. He needs capital or he loses everything. You have equity. This is how families work. My brother was sitting to my father's right, and he had the decency to look at the table when my father said it. He was 2 years older than me, and for most of my life I had loved him the way you love someone out of sheer proximity. You grow up next to a person, you think that means something. It took me a long time to understand it doesn't automatically mean anything at all. His dental practice had been failing for almost 18 months. I knew because my mother had been calling me about it since the spring, each call a little longer, a little more pointed. She never asked directly. She would say things like, I just don't know what we're going to do. And then wait, and when I didn't volunteer myself, she would sigh and the call would end and she would try again 2 weeks later. Before I tell you what I did next, leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from. I want to know what time it is wherever you are right now. I looked at the legal pad my father had slid across the table. He had written out numbers in his careful engineer's handwriting. The equity in my house, current market estimate, what it would cover, what would remain. He had done real math. He had sat down and calculated how much of my life to take. I'm not signing anything tonight, I said. My voice was steady. I was surprised by how steady it was. We're not asking you to sign tonight, my mother said quickly. She was using her soft voice, the one that meant the conversation was already decided, and she just needed me to come around to it. We just want you to understand the situation. I understand the situation, I said. He built that practice from nothing, my father said. He put in 6 years. You want to watch that disappear because you won't help? I didn't create the debt, I said. No one's saying you did. My mother reached across the table and touched my hand. Her fingers were cold. We're saying you're in a position to help. That's all. Family helps. Family. I looked at my brother. He was still looking at the table. I thought about asking him to look at me. I decided against it. I need to think about it, I said. My father's jaw tightened. My mother smiled with her mouth. We ate the pot roast and nobody said much else, and I drove home on the highway with my hands very carefully at 10 and 2. Before I tell you what happened next, you need to know something about what I do for a living. I am a senior compliance officer for a regional bank. I have been in financial compliance for 11 years. My entire job is finding the things someone hoped I wouldn't find. Irregularities in loan applications, documentation that doesn't quite line up, numbers that add up on paper in a way that numbers don't add up in real life. I am very good at it. I am good at it partly because I grew up in a house where you had to be. 3 days after that dinner, I pulled my own credit report. I do it quarterly. It is the same instinct that makes me check the deadbolt twice before I go to bed. I wasn't expecting anything. It had been a normal week, and then I was sitting at my kitchen table with my second cup of coffee, and I saw it, a hard inquiry, 2 weeks old, a mortgage refinance application submitted against my property. I set down my coffee cup very carefully. The application had not been submitted by me. The contact information listed was not mine. The signature, which I pulled through the bank's document retrieval system the next morning using my access credentials, had my name on it, but I did not write it. I sat in my car in the parking garage for a long time after I found it. Then I went back upstairs and I started working. I didn't call anyone. I didn't confront anyone. People in my field have a saying about that. You don't tip the bucket before you've finished filling it. You need the full picture before you move, because once you move, the picture changes, and you only get one chance to capture what was actually there. The refinance application had been submitted through an online portal, which meant it had a digital trail. I knew the loan officer it had been assigned to, not personally but professionally. We had worked with her institution before. I made a call, a professional courtesy call. I explained that I was seeing a suspicious inquiry on my credit file and asked if she could confirm whether the application was still pending. It was. It had been submitted 11 days ago. The listed co-applicant was my father. I wrote that down on a notepad. I stared at it for a while. Then I kept looking, because in this work you learn that where there is one thing, there is usually more than one thing. I requested a full credit disclosure through the Bureau's fraud department using the identity theft protocol. It took 4 business days. What came back was not one application, it was a pattern. A personal loan application submitted 7 weeks earlier, a credit card application submitted 2 months before that, an equity line of credit submitted 5 weeks ago and already in underwriting, all of them in my name. All of them submitted from the same IP address, which resolved to my parents' home network, which I knew because I had helped my father set up the router 3 Thanksgivings ago, and he had never changed the default settings. My brother's practice was not underwater because of bad luck. He had borrowed against the practice 3 times in 4 years. He had taken on a business partner who left with the equipment. He had bought a second location he couldn't staff. He had made bad decision after bad decision, and at some point my parents had decided the solution was to transfer the consequences to me. I thought about calling a lawyer that night. I thought about calling the police. I thought about a lot of things. What I actually did was make a list, because that is how my brain works when I am frightened. I make lists, I make order. I put the thing in front of me and I look at it directly instead of letting it come at me from the side. At the top of the list I wrote, what do they think they have? And then I wrote below it, in smaller letters, what do I actually have? Then I made an appointment with my attorney, a woman I had worked with on a compliance case 2 years before. I showed her everything. She was quiet for a long time. Have they contacted you about any of this? She asked. My parents had me to dinner, I said. They told me my brother needed help and that I should sign over the equity in my house. And you said? I said I needed to think about it. She nodded slowly. Okay, she said. Here's what we're going to do. The second dinner was 6 weeks later. My mother called and said they wanted to talk again, that my brother had some paperwork for me to look at, that it would be better to do it in person. I said of course. I said I'd bring dessert. I brought a lemon cake from the bakery on Clement Street, because it is my father's favorite, and because I wanted him to feel comfortable. I wanted all of them to feel comfortable. I needed them to walk into that room believing that they had already won. My sister-in-law wasn't there this time. My brother told me she had a work thing. I thought about what it meant that she had made herself scarce. The paperwork my brother put on the table was a deed transfer document. Not a loan, not a lien, a transfer. They had moved from trying to borrow against my house to trying to take my house. This is cleaner, my father said in the same voice he had used 6 weeks ago. Always that word, cleaner, like what they were doing was a matter of tidiness. It lets us use the asset directly without the complications of a loan structure. The bank would want to be involved if it's a loan, my mother added helpfully. This way it's just family. I looked at the document, it was real. It had been prepared by an actual attorney, someone whose name I didn't recognize. My brother had paid someone to draft a deed transfer document for my home without my knowledge or participation in advance of asking me to sign it at a dinner table. Can I have a minute to read through it? I asked. Of course, my mother said. I read through it, I took my time. I asked 2 clarifying questions about the language in the transfer clause, the kind of questions that made it look like I was almost convinced and just needed to understand the mechanics. My brother answered them. He was more relaxed than he had been at the first dinner. He thought this was going well. I put the document down. I can't sign this, I said. My father's face went very still. What do you mean? I can't sign it. I reached into my bag, not because I don't want to help, because this document is for a property I no longer own. The silence that followed was the kind of silence that has a texture. You can feel it against your skin. What did you say? My mother said. I put a folder on the table. Inside was a copy of the closing disclosure from the sale of my home, completed 4 weeks earlier. I had sold it in a sale-leaseback arrangement to a real estate investment group that a colleague had connected me to. The sale-leaseback meant I could continue living there as a tenant for up to 2 years while the title transferred. We had closed quickly because it was a cash transaction and there was no appraisal contingency. My father had been watching the county records, but the transfer hadn't been filed yet when he scheduled this dinner. He had been 1 week too slow. The deed transferred on the 14th, I said. I have been renting my own house for the past 3 weeks. There is no equity to sign over because I don't own the property anymore. My brother pushed back from the table. You did that on purpose. I sold my house, I said. People sell houses. You knew what we needed that equity for. I knew what you wanted it for, I said. That's not the same thing. My father stood up. He was a big man, always had been, and he used his size the way some people use their voice, as a way of filling a room until there wasn't room for anyone else. Where is the money? He said. In a trust, I said. Irrevocable. Set up through my attorney's office. You can't attach it in a lawsuit, you can't compel a transfer, and you certainly can't forge a signature to access it. When I said forge, he looked at my mother. It was a fast look, just a flicker, but I had been watching for it. We don't know what you're talking about, my mother said. I know you don't, I said. So let me be direct. I took a second folder out of my bag. This is the complete credit disclosure I obtained through the fraud department at TransUnion. It documents 6 separate credit applications submitted in my name over the past 4 months, all originating from your home network, including a mortgage refinance that listed Dad as co-applicant. I put it on the table. That is identity theft. It is a federal crime. It carries up to 15 years. My mother made a sound that was not quite a word. My brother said, "We were going to pay it back." "I know," I said. "That's what everyone says." My father took one step toward me and then stopped. He was reading my face, trying to find the thing that would make this go differently. He had spent my whole childhood doing that, reading me, looking for the lever. For a long time he had been good at finding it. "You would do this to your own family," he said. "I would do this to people who stole my identity," I said. "The family part is your framing, not mine. I will sue you," he said. "I will take you to court for everything you put us through. The stress alone." "Go ahead," I said. "File the lawsuit. The moment you do, every document in this folder becomes attached to the public record. The credit applications, the deed transfer request, the forged refinance signature. The bank's fraud department has already been notified. They are waiting to see if I pursue charges. I picked up my bag. If you file against me, you answer all of it at once. If you leave me alone, I walk out of here and we never speak of it again." I stood up. I pushed my chair in. My mother was crying, the way she cried when she wanted something, with her head tilted slightly and her eyes very wide. I had spent a long time being moved by that. I wasn't moved by it anymore. I walked toward the front door. My brother said my name. I didn't stop. I had almost reached the entryway when my father moved past me and put his hand flat against the door. Not a grab, just a hand on the door, holding it shut. But his body was between me and the exit, and that was enough. "You're not leaving with those documents," he said. I looked at him. "Dad," I said. "Those are copies. I don't care. You're not walking out of here and destroying this family over a misunderstanding." "I'm walking out of here," I said, "because the alternative is staying, and I'm done staying." He didn't move. I took out my phone and turned the screen toward him. I had been on a call with my attorney since before I sat down to dinner. She had been listening for 47 minutes. "Everything that's happened in this room tonight has been recorded and witnessed," I said. "The refinance application, the deed transfer document, the admission that you were going to pay it back, your hand on this door. My attorney will determine what to file and when. If you don't move, I'm going to call 911 from this phone right now, and we're going to add obstruction to the list." He moved. He stepped back from the door and he looked at me, and for the first time in my entire life my father looked old, not tired, old, like something had finished happening to him and he knew it. I opened the door. The night air outside was cold, the way November in the Bay Area gets cold, which is not brutal cold, but the kind that cuts right through you anyway. I walked to my car. I sat in the driver's seat for 3 minutes before I started the engine. My hands were shaking in a way they had not shaken inside the house. Then I drove home. The civil case took 8 months. My attorney filed the fraud complaint with the Federal Bureau the following Monday. The credit card issuer filed their own separate complaint once they had the documentation. The bank that had the refinance application in underwriting pulled it immediately and referred the matters to their fraud unit. My father's name was on the refinance application as co-applicant. That meant his fingerprints were on it legally, not just morally. His attorney tried to argue he hadn't understood what he was signing, that he had been helping his son navigate a complicated process and had not known the name on the application belonged to me without my consent. That argument did not go well for him. My brother cooperated with investigators in exchange for a reduced charge. He had been the one to submit most of the applications. He knew exactly what he was doing. His cooperation bought him probation and mandatory financial counseling and 3 years of supervised repayment to the creditors who had opened accounts before the applications were flagged. His practice had already closed by then. His wife had filed for separation 2 months after my second family dinner. I don't think that part was my fault. I think it had been coming for a long time. My mother was not charged. Her attorney made the case that she had known about the plan but had not participated in the execution, and the distinction held. I think about that sometimes. I don't have a clean feeling about it. I don't think clean feelings are available in situations like this, and I've stopped looking for them. My father paid a fine and completed community service and had the conviction on his record. His engineer's brain had approached robbing his daughter the same way he had approached everything else in his life, methodically and with documentation, and in the end the documentation was exactly what undid him. I still live in the house on Clement Street, renting it from the investment group, which is a strange thing to do, but stranger things have happened to me. I have a lemon tree in the backyard that was there when I moved in, and every spring it produces more lemons than I can use, and I give them to my neighbors and I make lemon cake for people who actually deserve it. I have a new credit monitoring alert system that I check every week. I have an attorney on retainer. I have a therapist who is helping me understand the difference between being loyal to people and being loyal to what those people actually are. Last month, I opened a new savings account. Not for any particular reason, not toward any particular goal, just a number in a column that belongs only to me, that no one else can access or redirect or spend down while I'm not looking. I looked at the opening balance for a long time. It was small. It was mine. That is the only sentence that has ever felt like enough.